My name is Gabby Powers. I am a product marketing manager at Netsertive, and this is our live panel webinar for April, which is centralized strategy, local impact, and the system that franchise marketers use to make both possible. So I am joined by two amazing franchise experts in the space. They will introduce themselves in just 1 second, and we will kick off into our discussion. Starting off, a little bit about Netsertive. If you are unfamiliar with us, Netsertive is the digital marketing partner really built for franchise and multi-location brands. Our goal is to help national networks win locally by combining data, automation, and hands-on expertise. Our platform really works to connect corporate marketing strategies with local execution with the goal of driving stronger visibility, better leads, and measurable ROI for every individual franchisee that we work with. So excited to start this conversation today. It's a conversation that many of our active customers and prospects that we talk to are trying to balance on the daily. And these two individuals on the call with me have also balanced this in their roles. And so before we get started, I'd love to have both of them introduce themselves and give a little bit of background into who they are and what their experience has been in franchising thus far. Adam, I'm going to put you on the spot and kick it over to you first. Introduce yourself.
All right. Well, I am Adam Povlitz, the CEO and president of Anago Cleaning Systems. We are a three-tier commercial cleaning franchise with supporting about 50 master franchises and 1,800 unit franchises across the US and Canada. And I have been in franchising going on, I want to say 17 years now. So it's been a long journey, but definitely eager to share today.
Awesome. I love it. And then Laura, I'll put you on the spot next.
Hello, everyone. I am Laura Rice. I have been in marketing for 29 years now, and I've have about 6 or 7 years of franchise experience. I've been in the health and wellness space as well as the preschool early education space. Most recently at Celebrity School for 5 years, managing the Fran Dev side as well as the local side. So working with a lot of franchisees. It was considered more of an emerging brand. So franchising started in 2019. First school opening in 2021, and they had about 45 schools as of last month. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think, a lot of this spans not just franchising, but, all over when you have, a bunch of local opportunities to market. So, and how things are different everywhere. So excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So we will go ahead and kick it off. And to go ahead and get started and kind of ground us in what we're talking about today, if you are a franchise marketer, if you are a local franchisee or owner of a franchise unit, you probably have felt a version of this challenge and tension before. And we hear it from franchise brands all the time, which is how do you maintain a strong, consistent brand strategy while still giving local ownership and local franchisees the flexibility that they need to be able to actually connect in their markets and drive results. And so the reality is that when you lean too far to corporate branded strategy or too far into localized strategy for individual franchise units, things will start to break. And so a framework that I think is very prevalent in the franchise space that gets talked about in general, but maybe not really dive deep into is the 80-20 rule. So this rule is really a framework where HQ or corporate marketers define the core 80% of marketing. So things like strategy, messaging, media approach, strategy, and all those things. And then the local teams or local franchisees have about 20% flexibility to tailor that execution of the corporate strategy based on their individual markets, audiences, and community. And so I think the most successful brands today are doing this really well and finding a better balance to collaborate with their owners to really build systems that can scale across the entire network and still be able to speak to local audiences. So that's really the crux of what we're diving into today. And then having two franchise experts of one, a very established franchise, and one has a lot of experience more in the emerging space. There's definitely different challenges and things to overcome in both of those. So first discussion topic is really where the local control creates challenges, right? I think every franchise marketer wants to give their franchisees and local owners more control to be able to really drive strategy, but ultimately has to balance that with some corporate messaging. And so giving local teams more control isn't always the answer. So I'd love to start, Laura, with you. is what's been your experience with giving maybe too much flexibility at the local level, or what did you see as far as maybe some problems that arose when local owners were given too much power or control over running their marketing strategies?
Yeah, I think Celebrate had a really good framework because they've been doing, or like the preschool for 30 years. So they had a really good framework, which is why franchisees wanted to get in the business. I think marketing, and Adam, I don't know if you agree, is where a lot of people struggle. They just, I could see it on their faces when they came through for, meet the team day. It's like they were so happy to have all that support, but a lot of times they look at it as more of a cost center. So I think they look to cut things to save on cost, not understanding that all things work together to, to build their awareness. Because a lot of us, as an emerging brand, people didn't know who we were in other states outside of Maryland, which is where the focus of the corporate schools were. So it's more about coming out of your school. I think they thought if they ran digital marketing and they were, the brand fund was being kicked off by corporate, that people would just flood through the door. And so, not getting out in the community, I think, is where, they struggled, or maybe the events didn't align, or, they weren't doing enough things. And so, you know, really having a strong FBC or the business coach that's in the market is really important too, because if they don't understand marketing and they're seeing a franchisee is doing X, Y, and Z, but they think that's enough, that can be a struggle too. So, again, putting together playbooks, like where you're seeing people struggle, if you don't have those things available, templates, things like that, you can have messaging that's out of control. You can have franchisees hiring vendors who aren't vetted through the company, and then you see ads pop up and they're like purple and pink, and that's not the brand color. So it's those types of things that can be a struggle. But if you have good communication with the franchisees, that should help combat that. But again, as you scale, it can become challenging because, people are doing things because they don't want to wait for corporate. It's taking too long, or they have done something at the last minute. There's not some planning going on. So it's really about those feedback loops and how you can help, and how you can prevent certain things in the future from happening so that people have a really good experience. Because as we know, we have certain expectations from things, from brands, especially ones that it's a franchise or you see it in multiple states. And if that customer experience is tarnished at all, it can impact the brand. So you want to make sure that what is happening when somebody walks through the door is critical. No matter how they got there, that part needs to be locked up as well, locked down and executed flawlessly, which is also can be a struggle.
Yeah, 100%. And has been your experience as well on your?
Yeah, so when Anago is a 37-year-old brand, and so I got to Anago when it was already a 20-year-old brand. And the founder was very much like your serial entrepreneur, classic, let's start another thing, let's start another idea. And so when I got there, even 20 years in, it was very much like slap a logo on it and you're Anago too. And so, when I joined, I mean, yeah, the like Laura said, like the colors on, so they all at the time all had individual like .com websites. So it'd be like anagodallas.com, anagoofatlanta.com, and every single one of the sites looked absolutely different. I think some people liked copying some of our competitors, and they were using a competitor who shall remain nameless, but does a lot of blue. And I go, okay, but you're not differentiating yourself from them. One of them, frankly, put it in purple, like you mentioned, and we're like, what? Where did you come up with that?
It looks good.
Yeah, they're like, we like purple. So I mean, I there's absolutely a value to the local, as you mentioned in the 80/20 rule, to the local spin that you're able to put on any of the marketing. But yeah, if you put too much power in the hands of the franchisees, your average franchisee is not someone with a marketing background, right? That they understand business operations. They probably come from wherever it is in the business world that they did. But I would imagine, maybe a third or maybe even 20% you come from marketing. And so and then everyone has their own spin on marketing. And so there's no uniformity whatsoever. And so it's absolutely crucial to have some level of control from the corporate level, and just saying this is what our brand is, this is what our brand means, this is what our brand looks like, this is the colors and why we've chosen these colors. and so forth. Otherwise, yeah, you don't have a brand, you have a logo and 50 different mini brands underneath it.
Yeah, 100%. And with that, Adam, I think that that experience of walking into a brand and seeing that everything is really disjointed, what was your first step after realizing, of course, that you were dealing with some decentralized branding? What was your very first step to one, get that under control, but two, be able to communicate to franchisees or stakeholders or regionals, whatever that may be, of the importance of getting everything back under the main umbrella of Anago?
So, I mean, it came down to, number one, just creating a lot of SOPs for things and saying, okay, this is how, what do our, even some of our manuals hadn't been refreshed at the 20-year point when I got there in like a decade. And
Yeah.
so it was like, it was everything needs a refresh. And it was, okay, let's get some little wins and stuff that maybe doesn't impact them on a day-to-day basis as much. Like the operating manual that, I love how much effort us franchisors put into the operating manuals, and the reality is that most of our franchisees, read it during training, and that's probably the last time they've looked at it. But it's just refreshing that and saying these are our standards. And then ultimately, we were still having, we've always done an annual conference and saying, okay, kind of, I've always approached it, kind of from a servant leadership approach. So it was like, what do we need, guys? What can we do to make this thing better, make ourselves look more professional? And it was pretty much, unanimous on the marketing front. Like we need a single brand image. And so then we said, okay, we're going to make the investment and we're going to pay, the company at the time that we did to design a whole site and a color scheme and say, how do we tie that to all our, printed collateral and digital collateral? And it was a major investment. We still at this point, we're a 37-year-old brand. We do not have a national ad fund or a national brand fund. And it's, yeah, no, it's sort of like it's a weird thing to say, at this age of a franchise. But so we just said we're going to come out of pocket. We're going to get this to get everyone under one individual or one actual brand look. But then we need everyone to participate. And look, admittedly, there were some people who had to have their arms twisted a little bit and said, well, this is what your agreement says. And so, yes, this is what your website's going to look like. But the vast majority, I mean, agreed. And we've been heading, deeper and deeper into that direction, since then. It's just a single look, single feel. Um, and it creates that national recognition that you really want, and that why you buy a franchise in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. And I like how both you and Laura mentioned the need for maybe updates or refreshes on operations manuals or guides or those things. It's almost a chicken or an egg situation of if we don't have resources to be able to guide franchisees, they will naturally go off and do their own thing. Or is it that we have them and they're not refreshed and so they don't really even need to address them? Laura, coming into an emerging franchise like you did, was it more of a lack of resources or more of maybe things that weren't addressing those franchisee issues or concerns or questions really effectively that you had to update?
Yeah, I think 'cause some of it was more creating the tools because again, we knew the business for 30 years. We knew the business in Maryland and the states where we operated. But as people got out and people came into the system with their fresh eyes, on the flip side, we can get really good things from franchisees, like things that they have done, that we can now put across the whole system. So creating playbooks, and we used Fran Connect. I'm not sure what system Adam you use or Gabby, but and you can house playbooks and different SOPs and things in there. So someone on the team was really great at managing all the SOPs, but everybody pitched in to create those. And I think just having things in writing, because again, as marketers, we do this stuff every day
Mm.
and we don't realize what the simple things that we think are common sense because we've been doing it for so long, it's foreign to people. So the more you lay it out, so having those tools and resources and building those playbooks, but also, Adam, I don't know what you guys do, but like offering more training, not just the fire hose of information they get when they come in as a new franchisee, especially with marketing, because marketing is evolving all the time. So offering different, webinars and lunch and learns and opportunities for training, I think is critical just as a reinforcement, because there were franchisees that would come in that were new, picked it up right away. Like they would think, this is great. I'm going to use the system. I'm buying a franchise for a reason. Like I'm going to do what you're telling me. And then there were ones in the beginning who were still struggling to understand the full funnel approach and like, why these things are important. And also when things were going well, they would then pull back on marketing, which is like the opposite of what you want to do. You want to make sure that you keep your foot on the gas. So it's more about, I have these conversations all the time, but marketing is a lot about education. We educate people all the time about what is critical and what you need to do. And unfortunately, it's looked at as a cost center versus an investment. And so it makes it a challenge because it is the first thing that a lot of companies, not just franchise, cut because they just don't see the value. But then they wonder why they're not getting any leads or nobody's coming through the door. How come nobody's heard of us? Well, because, we're not letting anybody know that we exist. And now, like, in this space, like we've got to do all kinds of content. So I think it's like they learned all of this stuff about digital marketing. Now there's a whole content element of like, okay, we need a lot of videos. We need that local stories. We need, and they don't want to be on camera and they're afraid to ask people for this or that. So it's just trying to lay that groundwork and telling that, giving them the confidence to know that they can do it, because ultimately the people are buying or coming in for their product or service because of them. They love them. So it's like, how can we get that person in the spotlight and share their story? And, so it's more about people coming out of their comfort zone. But when they do, it's amazing. Like it works really, really well. But yeah, it was more about, we were in the process of creating everything. And some things go away. I mean, some things are new. And with AI, I mean, it's just, everything's changing. So it's about adapting to and educating. So we can't just do something and then not tell the franchisees what we did, because they have to know. And we did have a brand fund, or we do have a brand fund. And so educating them on how that's being spent and, how that benefits them, but it also works in concert with what they're doing locally. Like both things need to be operating.
Yeah.
So it's more educational and just, yeah, like you said, like creating everything. So still in that process of creating.
Awesome. I think that's super, super beneficial for both an emerging and an established, is just, are we creating things that our franchisees find valuable, and that they feel like they can actually follow tangibly? And so getting more on the tactical side of things, I think a big discussion as well is what should be centralized versus local, and locally owned and operated, and that piece of it. And so, Adam, going back to you, what are some things that you think must be centralized no matter what? I know some of them may be obvious, but I think it's helpful for the franchise marketers on the call, especially the things that they need to be controlling constantly, and maybe the things that there's some more flexibility around for local owners to have impact on.
So it's gonna sound a little cliche, but almost anything that's tied to like vision, mission, value, that is what has to be centralized. Is here's who we are as a brand, here's what we stand for, here is what you get when you're buying service from Anago. And then ultimately, I think our franchisees actually do a great job at, the locally owned and operated. I think it's crucial for them to be out in the community networking. The like Laura said, people don't understand a lot of times, they want leads. Every franchisee says, I want leads, but they don't understand how much work has to be done at the top and the middle of the funnel in order to get those leads who've even heard of you when it's time for them to make a decision at the bottom of the funnel. And so, what in my mind, what should be centralized is that top of funnel area and middle of funnel. Like, what is the brand? What should you expect from the brand? And then ultimately, the localized side is some top of funnel, right? It's the community, it's the networking events, it's the joining the local chamber of commerce, whatever it may be. In our world, it's my business, even though it's in cleaning, it's a sales and marketing business. And so, when people say to us, oh, I need to cut back my marketing budget, I say, if you were a pizza franchise, would you start cutting back your cheese budget? Like, this is what we do. And so
Yeah.
you can't cut back your marketing budget, because that's literally the entire business is sales and marketing. And so if you want to do it without spending any money, like I don't know how to do that yet. If somebody can teach me how to, sell a bunch of business without, spending anything on marketing, then, I'm all ears. But in the meantime, getting out in the community, and then of course, the local, any kind of local advertising that they can do, which with guidance from us. I mean, you don't want them to say something that, shouldn't be said in an ad, or, some kind of display or digital PPC or anything like that. But generally speaking, I would say, yeah, top to middle of funnel should be probably, managed by the corporate office. And then bottom of funnel, with insight from the corporate office, would be to the local franchisee.
That's awesome. Laura, any more thoughts on centralization?
Yeah, and I was thinking too, like, I know you mentioned this in the beginning, but those KPIs are what is important. So making sure that they have clarity around KPIs and what it's going to take to make them profitable. Because again, as an emerging brand, like that was the goal, is to get the schools profitable, or a place where they have a good occupancy rate. And so making sure that they understand the KPIs, the amount of leads that we need to drive, whether it is national or local. I think with you know things like enrollment, it is really a local play, because we have the national brand, but there's multiple schools within the area. So we want to make sure that we're driving people to the right school, or they see us, or so. But if they go to a school in Dallas, and they go to a school in Houston, or they go whatever, we want that experience to be the same. So the tour, the things that they're hearing, those should all be consistent. The follow-up process, like, I think, I don't know about you guys, but like, I feel like a lot of people only concentrate on the new customers, new, where retention is so critical. Retention and word of mouth. If you have happy people coming through your door, and you just didn't like pay the money to get them, and like, wash your hands of them at that point because you got them, you will have leads coming in from those people talking about you. I mean, the Facebook groups are popping off all the time, talking about, different brands, whether it's, where'd you go to lunch today? What was your experience like? Like, where did you send your kids to school? Where they go to camp? All kinds of things. People are looking for opinions, and you want happy customers talking about your brand. And that kind of stuff you can't put a price on. And all those things come with time. I think another thing that people need to be educated on too is just that not everything is a lead driver. So, the community events, Adam, you talked about, like, that are also critical for all these businesses to embed yourself in the community. They're not all going to drive you leads right at that moment, because not everybody has a cleaning issue. Not everybody needs childcare, whatever it is, but they're going to remember you when it is time. And that is what's most important, or they're going to tell your friend about it. So, I think, just education is just really important, and understanding that, well, I went and did that, but I didn't get any leads. Yeah, but you might 6 months from now. Like, let's just wait. So it's the constant education of put in the effort. It's just like a diet. I always say, like, with weight loss. I don't know if y'all have had a diet, but it's like the whoosh moment. It's like you have put, like this, like the atomic habits. You're putting all the little things in, and then all of a sudden you're gonna have this, like, downside of all these leads coming in. The thing, it's working. It's finally working. It just takes time, but you have to keep it up. So you
Yeah.
can't just do it and then stop. So, but I think those KPIs are really important, like what you're getting, what you're going towards to make budget and make, your performer work. And then lead response expectations. So if you want them to call a lead, a customer or family within, a day, like that needs to happen everywhere.
Yeah.
The tour experience, the consultation, whatever that is, the follow-up process, all those things are critical. They need to happen no matter what location somebody's going to.
100%. And I think too, just speaking to that awareness piece, so many of our active customers and people who we talk to in our sales process are more inclined, I think, to look at awareness tactics as beneficial and wise investments now than what I would say maybe 2 to 3 years ago, even because of this age of AI, and the concept that the way that AI is pulling brands and local visibility and discovery is shifting so much, and those awareness pieces tend to impact it so much greater. And so I feel like we can't have a discussion nowadays without talking about AI to some regard or extent. But I think one other large thing that should be centralized is a brand's AI strategy and how you're really navigating this new landscape digitally, and helping to educate, but also guide local owners into using AI or how to most effectively do that, safely do it for a brand. So I would love either of you guys, if you have any AI pieces that you guys have done at a national level or things that you really invested in or found ways to use it operationally, even in a business, would love any use cases around that as well. Because I think a lot of people are still investigating and learning how to effectively implement and educate franchisees on AI practices.
So, for us, one of the things I've heard, and I'm an AI geek, right? I was a geek in high school. Didn't really work out back then, but it paid off now.
Look at you.
And so for me, I've been very focused on AI. I mean, we hold ourselves out to be a technology brand that happens to be in cleaning with some of the software that we use for our customer service. Um, and for us, everything you hear on any of the AI related, podcasts or newsletters or whatever, where it says AI implementation absolutely must come from the top or it will not get implemented is 100% true. The average employee and the average franchisee is worried about where they're going to get their next lead, how are they going to handle the customers they're having. They want to do their job and get home to their family. And so if you as the CEO or COO or CMO or something like that aren't focused on AI, I guarantee you none of your franchisees, maybe a few are geeks like me, but the vast majority, it's barely on their radar. They're using ChatGPT like it's like a Google search still. Um,
Mhm.
and so, what we've done, at least at Anago, number one, I mean, our technology focuses on that. We have software that we use for customer service where the whole point is, um, you know, people can take pictures of their issue and, it gets reported. And all of the AI layer over top of that analyzes it and determines, what actions need to be done and what training needs to be done and that sort of stuff. But more importantly, I mean, just in the day-to-day usage, we first created an AI, usage policy to explain to people like, please don't upload our operating manuals into ChatGPT or something like that. Like there are things that suddenly become public domain because you were trying to mess around with something. So number
Right.
one is just kind of safety and responsibility on that. And then number two, we recently hired someone who's leading up our like national sales training program and sales summits that we're going to be creating shortly here. And it was all around like how to use AI to even, to generate more leads and research your leads more thoroughly. And so, all of that comes around where, the average person doesn't know how to do it. They don't want to spend the time to learn how to, do Claude code or, some of the more advanced things. And so you go, how can we use AI and at the speed it's going, you can put it together pretty quickly. But put it together in a usable format so that your franchisees can use it and quickly see the benefit. And then when they start seeing the benefit, everyone, once you've used some AI and it's made your life easier, you get that, you get a taste for more. And it's like, oh wow, it can do that. And oh, it can do that too. And so then, it creates a natural positive spiral toward, more interest in AI.
Awesome. We love AI geeks here, so you're welcome. Welcome here all the time, Adam. I think it's such a big thing and it's really daunting for some people, but others are really leaning into it and seeing the impact so greatly in their business and personal life too. It's crazy how much you can get it done. So I love that. The centralization of it, I think is super important to make sure that everyone's benefiting from learnings of everyone as they're exploring it and learning it, but also to ensure that you're doing things safely in compliance with data and all of that as well. It's so important. Laura, any thoughts on that side before we move to the next discussion topic?
Yeah, I think, just to add to that, being just, working with your agencies, making sure you have the right agency partners, I think is really critical that are, because AI is a scary thing and it's changing all the time. So, and those of us that are around with the dot-com boom, like we know like a lot of dot-com businesses were around and then they disappeared. So it's like, we know this isn't going away, but it's like, how do you, utilize it properly? And it is, like I said, it can be a scary thing. Like people will get excited about it. And then you'll see ads with, like children that their lips aren't moving, but there's, voiceover in the background, like we're dealing with, with Celery was dealing with children. So it's like,
Yeah.
we just want to be very mindful of telling people like Adam, like you said, like having a policy of like what you're supposed to be doing, how you're supposed to be using it. But there were certain things within like review platforms that would be really good with helping to respond to reviews, like AI that way. Like those things help make things more efficient. Also some call tracking, dashboards, things like that that have that, the AI features that really help. Because we haven't really talked about, I know data's in this discussion, but like having that data and the dashboards and being able to get that real time is critical. But my big thing is having the right agency partners. If you're working with agencies that, have AI in their, they have to have an AI strategy and roadmap. And what does that look like? And how is that going to benefit you as a client? I think is really some of those questions you should be asking now when you're working with different agencies.
1000%. And we can definitely skip to the role of data. That was a great segue for us in that sense of, I think data is one of the most powerful things that you can utilize when maybe you're an Adam who joins a network and sees this decentralized marketing strategies and needing to bring it together. Or if you're just looking to determine where to make that split between centralization and localization. And so I think it's really where things start to connect. So I would love your perspectives on what data actually matters when you're trying to align HQ and franchisees, and what data points do you see franchisees respond to be able to really tag on to that corporate strategy and feel really good and aligned with what corporate's trying to push down. Data points, obviously businesses are very different here, but would love to just know what you guys focus on when looking to coach franchisees, and also just on the topic of centralization and localization as well.
Especially with AI, there is no data that doesn't matter at this point. You know what I mean? Especially when you're able to, run it through some sort of query, or, if you're good at prompting, you'd be amazed at some of the things that tie together suddenly, and you find out, that, something, I don't know, I'm making up stuff right now, but like,
Yeah.
maybe the square footage somehow ties to the season in which they sell. I mean, I'm making it up, I'm right now on the spot, but the idea is all the data matters. That said, I think, our franchisees struggle, honestly, still, with understanding about the cleanliness of the data and making sure that it's all organized in such a way that you can do something with it, right? I mean, I was literally just on a call the other day talking to one of our franchisees because one of our more legacy systems that allows sort of free typing in for lead source, even though most of the leads off like the website come, with an API connection. But but if someone calls in from the website, which happens a lot in our business, they key in what the lead source is. And I kid you not, like, I think one of them said website, one of them said website, web. Another lead said like, the website, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't use that.
Getting rid of that field.
Yeah. Jeez.
So I said,
So real.
fixing
So
your new
real.
CRM, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like I have 15 ways to say the website.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's unusable. And so then you have to, now again, we've nerded out and used AI and said, okay, here's how we're going to link all this data up and clean it up using AI to say, and if it says any of these 10 examples, that just means the website. But, um, but you run into that, and so it's hard to educate your franchisees on, all the data matters because they're running 100 miles an hour. They're trying to, get more clients and grow their businesses. But it's all that little bits of data again adds up to where now, like I said, we have, 1,800 franchisees servicing 50 something thousand clients. And it's like, all that data all of a sudden piles up. And if it's dirty data, I can't, you didn't buy a franchise again. You bought a bunch of local businesses.
Yeah.
And you don't have national level data if it's not clean. And so, and frankly, to address the point on the slide here, right? If you're not using data to make decisions, you're just guessing. And so
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's absolutely crucial to just ensure, we probably stress it at every meeting, hey, make sure your data is clean. Here's what we recommend. Here's a best practice. You know, we even offer services to our franchisees of like, hey, we'll get in and clean up your data. And just to get it to where it needs to be so that it's usable across the system and not just 50 different ways to say website on your lead sources.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, especially now, the data, it used to be cash is king. Now data is king.
Mm, I love it. That's like headline, screenshot, screen grab, all the things. That's awesome. Awesome. I think that's something that most marketers are discovering probably the hard way. But once you get your data cleaned up and website is the only term for your lead source. I think that's a great example, right? Like it's something small like that, but it does disjoint your data so much where you're not looking at a million different lines of data instead of, one concise summary. So I think that's super fair. Laura, I know you had thoughts on that too, so I want to make sure you can share.
Yeah, no, I love data. I think, Aaron and I actually met from a data conversation that I did at FCXC a couple years ago, because you can collect as much data as you want, but make sure you're using the data that you collect. Like, I think that like we have all this stuff, but what are we doing? What are we using it for?
Yeah.
But what I do love about data is that it tells you where the issue is. So everything's not a marketing issue. And so what we were finding too is that, because the conversion was an issue in with the tour process, or, and once they're in the location, they were having to spend more money to drive more leads instead of, while they're trying to fix where the actual issue is. But so they wound up spending more money, because you can see the lead volume is fine, because that's what they'll blame it on, is the leads. I need more leads, I need more leads. But how were the leads treated when they came through the door? Like, getting somebody to come in through a tour is huge. I mean, every lead should be treated as gold. And so I think a lot of times people, if they don't, franchisees have a good understanding of what they're spending because it's coming out of their pocket.
Yeah.
But in other areas of the business, like, they don't understand that lead just cost like, $350, and you basically called them one time, or you know ignored their message or whatever it is. And those are the kinds of things that get me hot, especially in addition to the website being labeled 700 ways in the CRM. But I think making sure that you have really clean data is important. The dashboards are important, the visibility of the dashboards to see where the breakdown is, and where they need more training, or they need, to have, or they could potentially even help others. Like, I love the mentor idea of them learning from each other versus learning from marketing, because it's like marketing, like, we just talk and train, but it's marketing. Like, having somebody go that has gone through it or is going through it, train, is awesome. Like, I don't know if you do that, Adam, at yours, but you talked about the franchise conference, like having opportunities there for networking, mentoring, hearing from successful franchisees of how they implemented something is really critical. And the data doesn't lie. So, and not everything's going to work across the board. So it's like, how can we tweak this to work in, Atlanta, something that was successful in Dallas? So there are ways to do it, or it could be something that's not going to, it's only going to work in Atlanta. So but again, if you don't have data, it's just a gut feeling, which again, those can be wrong at times. Especially if you're hearing it from, I don't want to say the uneducated marketer, but it can, like, people that don't understand marketing could be like, "Why these leads are bad. I'm just spending money and they're bad."
Yeah.
Well, we don't know that because you didn't put anything in the system. We don't know if they came in for a tour. We don't know if you followed up with them. We don't know when they started, if they started. So it's those kinds of things, like, and that's can be hard to train because they get so busy. It's like they've got to take the time to go and put in the data. It's critical.
I would just add to what Laura said also about the learning from other mentor franchisees is absolutely crucial because yeah, we have an annual conference every year where all the franchisees and all their employees and everyone's invited, and when there's the pageantry and the awards and obviously the educational sessions. But then we, maybe 10 years ago ish, started having, we just call it a mid-year meeting, and it's literally by franchisees for franchisees. We facilitate, we do not present. The franchisees create all the presentations, all the content, and only franchise owners are invited. No employees or anything like that. And so it's just more like round tables and networking and seeing best practices. And it's amazing because, as the corporate office, we could talk about data management or, some sort of sales process until we're blue in the face. And then
Yeah.
they hear their neighbor who's really successful talking about it. And finally, like, the light bulb clicks for them. And so it's, yeah, I think that approach has been extremely effective for us.
Is that
I
like
love
a national thing, Adam? I'm sorry to cut you off, Gabby. that
Oh, you're
sounds
good.
really cool.
I love that.
Like it's a national thing where they go to a like
Yeah.
a hotel or whatever. And they're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
That's
We
awesome.
and we facilitate it. We pay for the hotel. We get, the F&B figured out and stuff like that. But then it's, via our franchise advisory committee, they work with the other franchisees and say, okay, who's going to be presenting on what? What do we all want to talk about? What do we all want to learn about? And then it's them sharing their successes with each other. It's
really cool.
been extremely effective. And so now we've actually expanded it. We have it's obviously sales reps, and then we have what we call brand managers, which is more like a customer service role. And so we're actually creating like brand managers only meeting and sales rep only meetings, so that it's just like a single topic. Some of them, obviously the big seminars, a couple of days, the mid-years, just now, actually, this first year, they asked for it to be like 2 half days and we'll see how that goes. But, having meetings, an annual meeting for every role, and then obviously the big meeting for everybody and the award ceremonies and that sort of stuff. It seems like people are more willing to network and share when they feel like, okay, it's just my peers here versus it's everybody.
And I'm sure they're experiencing the same thing. So it's good to,
Oh yeah.
that's awesome. I love that. That's great.
I think that's a cool way. We are close to time, but I think that's a pinnacle of collaboration right there. And I think that collaboration piece is the secret sauce to making 80/20 marketing, but also operations and training and sales training, like Adam mentioned as well. Like all of those things, they learn so much better from their peers. And also peers sometimes have a unique perspective that does get across to their owners, their owner peers so much more. And so I absolutely love that. And I think that is an incredible place to end our conversation. We do have some Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat for those who are joining us. But I really want to thank both Adam and Laura for joining us today. I think this conversation is incredibly insightful, and very helpful for franchise marketers and for owners as they're looking to figure out what makes the most sense for how to follow a national brand strategy, but be able to localize it and tailor it to your local community as well. And so I want to thank both of you guys for your time today and being able to share your expertise.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, guys, we will close this off. But of course, any questions, feel free to email me at gpowers@netsertive.com, and we can follow up with our recap and answer those questions as well. But again, thank you guys for your time today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.